Oh.
Damn, now it is.
Right.
Hey, Jesse's on. Nice.
I know you have a big fan club. That's really cool.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Hello, hello.
We'll give it just one more minute. We've got a couple more people in the waiting room. Oh, hi, Jillian. Feel free to put your cameras on. We want to see some faces. Thanks.
Hello.
Jesse, nice to meet you.
Thanks, Jillian.
Hi, Sandy.
Hello. The cat can come on too, Jillian. Don't worry. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's kick it off. First, thanks so much, everybody that can be here. Thanks for having your cameras on. We'd love to be able to get to see the community and meet the people behind the cameras. I am just very excited for our guest today. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Sylvia, co-founder of Cura, and tell you a little bit about Cura. We're a community here that is helping first-generation college grads launch and grow their careers. We're hoping to be able to provide some social capital, network insights with experts like Mr. Fuchila, and learn about some of the pain points and struggles that we've had so that you all don't make the same mistakes, can make your own mistakes. And just offer a safe place to help to be order to navigate your early career in life. And I want you to meet Sylvia, the brains behind the operation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're really excited to be here. You know, we have a series, a Cura Chat series. We invite a special guest every month to come and talk about their career journeys. We're really excited to have Ruben Dario Villa here today to really talk about his journey and a little bit about his background and how he got here and what's taking place. And so today's theme is around taking advantage of your unfair advantage, right? Life throws us curveballs. It's what do you do with it? Where do you go? And how does that lead to other opportunities? But sometimes it requires us to get a little bit uncomfortable. So, Ruben, would love for you to jump right in and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruben Dario Villa, aka Mr. Fuchila. And of course, I wanted to thank Jen and Sylvia and the Cura team for having me here. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to get to know y'all a bit more too later on. So we'll jump into some community questions down the road. But first off, I'm a first generation Chicano artist based in Gilroy, California. I'm a child of immigrants. My parents immigrated here from Mexico, and they went to rival high schools and here in San Jose. And they were meant to be together, and so they actually met while working at McDonald's. At a McDonald's in downtown San Jose that no longer exists. I think now it's like condos and like high luxury condos. But my dad was the night manager at McDonald's, and he kept scheduling my mom to work to close with him so that he could have more time with her. So, so we talk about like, and they were young too. I think they were dating since their early teens. Like 16, 17. I think it was like 17, 18, and so it was like fast food, fast romance. And so they made quite an epic beginning to my story. And so one of the things that like really marks something like a pivotal moment in my legacy is when my dad and his cousin opened up a menswear store in downtown San Jose called Diaz Menswear, and actually is still around today. Almost 40 years later, my tío Alfredo is still running it, and in fact, the end of July is going to be the last day of Diaz Menswear. After almost 40 years in business, he's retiring. He's calling, he's kind of moving on. But that's where I've always gotten my, not just my Pendletons, my Levi's, my fedoras, and all that, but also the inspiration to see that like early on, my dad was he's been and always been an entrepreneur ever since leaving fast food, and so all of that to say is that I had a kind of a great example of what it means to, on my mom's side, to do something that is very secure, 30 years at the county, retired with a pension, and then on my dad's side, doing that, working for yourself, figuring it out, finding side hustles, doing what it takes to get it done, and having a successful balance there between the two of them. And that's kind of been the story of my life, kind of in a nutshell, balancing something secure. I spent the last 12 years at Apple and Google in tech. I didn't grow up with like the social capital and the network that y'all mentioned. That was something that I have acquired and still acquiring to this day now, and already, seeing like how, I mean, I had a network. Let me rephrase. I had a great network. I just didn't have it in the places where I had to step into, like tech. I had a great network of anyone you could think, any of the trades. You needed something done in your house, we had someone for that. You needed something fixed with your cars, we had someone for that. You needed someone at the church, you needed connections at your local church, we had that. So we had a great network, just not necessarily in the areas that I was looking to get into. So like I said, I spent the last 12 years in tech, and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot there. And after the pandemic hit, I worked from home, and that was all fun and good because I got to experience what life without a commute was. And living in Gilroy and working in Gilroy was beautiful, except for the fact that I was stuck to a screen for most of the time. And when I put it in my brain that I gave my wife a 3-year head start. I said, in 3 years, I'm going to leave Google. So just giving you a heads up. It actually took more like 5 because of the pandemic, but when I was really set to bounce and to get out, luckily for me, uh, God made sure that I left with a gift, and so I was laid off by Google in the January of 2023, and basically took that as a blessing and opportunity to do what I've always wanted to do, which was to work for myself, something that I had already been interested in early on, even as a kid, but working for myself has been one of the greatest blessings, greatest growth spurts I've ever had in my life. I feel like up to this point. So I'm really excited to share a bunch of that journey with y'all. I am also a father and a husband, so balancing all of these life ups and downs has been something that I've done alongside my wife, who we started dating at 16. I was in her quinceañera. So there's a whole other trajectory there, but sort of a real blessing and real opportunity when you know someone for that long. And of course, having 2 children, my daughter Luna de Aslan, Xiomara Villa, she is 8, and my son Teocali Calixto Villa, who is 6. And so we're there. Luckily, right now they're at summer camp, so that's helpful. That's why it's not like super loud here right now. But yes, for the last year and a half now, I've been a full-time artist, designer, curator of culture. I have just finished or about to finish my first mural, so getting into that space, which was amazing. And the last thing is that I am in full swing of prepping for my second annual La Ofrenda Festival, which is Gilroy's Gilroy's inaugural Dia de Muertos festival and wellness fair. And so all of that couldn't have been possible without being laid off from Google, which is why I talk a lot about, your unfair advantage and kind of, very much the when life gives you lemons type of attitude. So,
That's
but
right.
yes, let's get into it some more. That was just
Ruben,
whew,
awesome.
that's the series.
Thanks for the intro. I love it.
Uh-huh.
And we have so many questions and so curious about so much. You talked about young Ruben. You've lived through Apple, Google, entrepreneurship. What did you want to be when you were a kid? Did you know that path ahead of you? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do?
Honestly, I didn't really. I mean, I'm sure I don't actually remember the things that I would tell my parents. I do remember at some point saying specifically to my teachers, they asked me like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I say, "I want to be a professional something, like a professional." And I think I mostly thought about it in sports terms. So like either a professional soccer player or a professional basketball player. I just thought like professional meant like sports. And so for me, it was in that realm. Of course, like that didn't really pan out for me, but I always thought about, for some reason, doing something with sports. Luckily, I still play indoor soccer to this day, so I still have a love for soccer. My son's playing it as well, so that's cool. But yeah, I think I mostly thought about sports. And then once I got closer to college, I thought about being a teacher, and so those were two of like the things that I had in my mind. Never really thought about art as a career. I knew I loved art, and I wanted to finally take an art class, because that's when I took my first art class, was at Santa Clara University. So it was something that I always did, and that I always loved, like showing off, and my mom my mom loved showing off. But we didn't, I was sent to with my brother, we were sent to the sports side of things, and my sister was sent to the art and the music side of things. And it's funny because I ended up playing soccer in high school. I ended up playing soccer and playing trumpet in the orchestra, and being in artists through like was it student government as well. So I blended all of those things in high school, but I never really considered any of those things a career. But when I was asked this question, I thought about teacher mostly, I think. Yeah.
That is so cool. I love what you just said about blending your interests and things where you were curious about, right? You let that kind of lead the way. That's great. One thing that really stood out for me as you were introducing yourself was around networking. You said, I didn't really have social capital, kind of built it, and I'm still building it. So when you look back and you were trying to kind of break into tech at the time, using your background in design, what's coming up for you as far as what worked, what didn't work, and what would you do differently, especially, given this early career audience here?
Yeah, I think what really worked was leaning back on after graduation, I mostly kept in contact with so I studied sociology and studio art. So those are my two majors. I like to say I have a double degree, a BS in sociology and a BA in studio art, but my wife always corrects me that I was 2 units short from getting officially those two
Don't
degrees.
tell anyone.
But we don't gotta tell anybody. So we're gonna keep it. I got a double degree in art and sociology, and that's literally what I've been using. Uh, um, Both of those really strongly, actually, in everything that I do. But as far as what worked, was remembering that just because you graduate doesn't mean you left that network. That is like your strongest anchor at that point in your life after leaving college, and even while you're in college, that's going to be your biggest network. And so as I was applying to jobs, well, before I thought about going into the workforce, I thought, well, why don't I really want to go and like continue studying art. And so I thought about, for there's uh the art center, and it's like a real like prestigious art school in Glendale, California. And I was like, that's the only art school that I knew about. And I was like, okay, let's go look at what they have offering for as far as like master's programs or like moving forward in art or like back, and I said, okay, well, I think they had art, design, and social justice masters, and I thought that was amazing. So I applied to that, and now looking at that, I'm like, wow, I had definitely had no reason being in trying to apply to that program, but that's always been kind of my MO. Like I have no reason being in the places where I end up, but it's kind of like what has made me so successful is just like that lack of fear of getting or the ignorance of the things that I should fear when stepping into those spaces. But so like back to the network part of it, I reached during that time that I was applying to those schools, I was talking to my professors, my art professors a lot, asking them how do I structure a portfolio to make sure that I make myself kind of um, like so I make myself stand out, to admissions over there, and just trying to make sure that I connected with my art professors a lot, so I help ask them for guidance. And then when I didn't get into that program, I started looking into other avenues, particularly in work. And at that time, luckily for me, Monster.com and like Career Builder was blowing up at that time, which meant that we didn't have to like mail off our resumes anymore through the mail. Like we could apply to jobs online and apply to jobs in mass. So I applied to probably like 100 jobs or something. And I figured a lot of them I was definitely not on paper qualified for. In particular, the one that I found that said company in Cupertino looking for Photoshop expert.
Mm.
And I feel like that would have thrown a lot of people off. Photoshop expert, the fact that they said expert in there, I think was probably on purpose to throw people off. But I was like, whatever. I don't really know Photoshop that well, but by the time they hit me up, if they ever do hit me up, I'll have learned it enough to get through whatever they need, whatever test or whatever. And that's what happened. So I got hit up, and luckily, at the very least, the portfolio I submitted was good enough to at least, have them tell me, okay, here's your design test. And when I started that design test, I immediately hit up my art professor again. I said, hey, this is what they're asking for. What do you think? And then he kind of gave me a quick rundown of the tools that I should probably focus on using. And so I started working with that. And so again, always connecting back to my network in college, my professors. I wish I would have done way more to build relationships with them while I was in college. I feel like it would have been an easier ask after graduating to hit them up, about things. I think maybe like one or two that I felt really comfortable with, and other ones I kind of had to sort of like really push myself to reach out to, which I know is a big deal, especially for first gen. It's always hard for us to ask for help, especially we feel like we're bugging folks, or like, why would they care to help us? Or, oh, here, there you go again, asking for something, and type of attitude. But I think there's a really beautiful window right now for a lot of college students and recent grads, that there's like probably no one. I mean, if they have like a heart, there's probably no one that wouldn't want to help you, because you're in like that beautiful window of time where everyone wants to see you succeed. Once you get older, people are like, whatever, you're on your own, like go figure it out. But like right now, it's like everyone's like, yeah, sure, I'll have a coffee chat with you, or yeah, sure, I'll connect you to so and so, or you know what, there is this one job I think you'd be great for. So kind of that understanding of like this moment in time and embracing what actually is available to you right now. So yeah.
I love that. And what comes to mind is how much you speak about your unfair advantage. And it really resonates with me. Can you tell us all a little bit about A, what does unfair advantage mean? And B, what's your unfair advantage that's made you so successful?
All right. So unfair advantage is a term that I heard while I was at Google. Actually, at Google, there's a program called Area 120, which is a program where you can, essentially they want Googlers to stay at Google and be entrepreneurial and start startups, so that one, Google can own them when if and when they're successful, but two, so that we don't lose the talent and of course create innovation, etc. Right? So I applied for that. So apparently there's like 2% of applicants get into Google, and of those, 2% of those get into this program. And luckily for me, I was one of those 2%. Myself and two other colleagues at the time, we started a startup called Emporium, and our idea was to essentially create a double-sided uh, commerce platform where we could plug suppliers, diverse suppliers, women and minority-owned business suppliers to the supply chain companies at Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 1000 companies. That way we could sort of diversify the supply chain and think about like diversity, equity, and inclusion from like a B2B standpoint, so that it's not such like a, oh, let's just hire more diverse people. It's like, what about giving huge contracts to diverse business owners so that the money trickles down from their like with their own, on their own terms. So that was our big idea, and luckily we did all of that for about 8 months, and that was wild. And you're basically in that program, you're allowed to like basically you leave your full-time role and you do this for your full-time role, and you keep growing it until you can no longer grow it, and then you get sunset, and then you get 3 months basically paid to find another job at Google, within like capital G Google. But anyway, so within that program, there was a whole training and onboarding about using Google's unfair advantage. Google's unfair advantage was the fact, obviously, access to a huge amount of capital, access to a huge audience, and access to, the smartest people, some of the smartest people in the world. So like that was Google's unfair advantage in this sense. And in my sense, while that was like all huge and amazing and beautiful, I thought about it in a different light, where the unfair advantage for me was all the things that felt like other folks from the outside would see them as obstacles, but in fact they were the very reason why I was thriving and surviving within the spaces that I was in. Primarily, I think for me, being first gen was one of my unfair advantages, and that was beautiful because I kind of alluded to it before, but because I didn't know what to fear, I didn't know the things that I should look out for, which some people might be like, wow, you have no idea what you're walking into. Aren't you afraid? And it's like, actually, I have no idea what to fear yet. So like, that's why I'm able to walk into spaces, and do really dumb things and make really dumb remarks. Looking back, not when I'm in the moment, I feel like I'm doing what I need to do because I'm trying to navigate and find my way around. And so, kind of going back to why that's been such a big deal in my life was because when I was applying to that job in Cupertino, which happened to be Apple, was during that design test, we were asked to basically scale up the iPhoto app icon, which at the time had like a palm tree with the sunset in the background, all looking thing. And it was small, and we had to blow it up like 4 times the size and redesign it, add more detail as needed. But of course, if you know anything about computer graphics, when you blow anything up, it's just going to look pixelated or blurry. So you had to actually do work to make it look good. And when they said, okay, add more detail as you want, I said, okay, well, this palm tree looks really nice now on this island looking thing in the background. I got that down, but it's missing something. I feel like it's missing like a coconut. Like, I'm going to put a coconut on this palm tree because I feel like it needs something. It's going to give it that like extra something because they said add more detail. So I did. And it was crazy because now looking back, I would have never done that at a company like Apple. That's not a place where you go and experiment with their look and feel. Like, you keep it in line with what they have and you don't do any of that. But even at that time, I'm unfortunately unhappy to say that I was an Android phone user at that time. And so I had no idea about Apple culture. I was like, whatever. And so I did that, and I'm still in close contact with my first boss and the hiring manager for that role. And she said, of like the 250 people we interviewed that entire week, the only test that I could remember was yours, and it was because of that coconut. And
Wow.
so that's how a coconut got me a job at Apple. So
Oh, I love that story. What a great story. I am loving the theme of, have no fear. Let me go for it. Let me just see what happens. And you're right. In the moment, you're just curious. You're following your curiosity. You're taking some risks. Now, looking back, you realize, wow, that was a risk. I didn't know Photoshop, right? What advice would you give to this audience to have more of that mentality? Because there is a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of feeling of, I need to check all the boxes before I apply to that job. I need to know this program before I get there. And that holds a lot of people back from just going for it and having the
Yeah.
conversation. Or I want to network, but I'm afraid they won't get back to me. Or I tried 3 times and they're still not getting back to me. What advice would you give to help instill kind of that energy that will help everyone be a little bit more brave and try and explore?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. But first, before I answer that, I feel like I have to acknowledge a couple things, a couple of privileges that I have in that space, and that's that I'm a man, and that I am an extrovert. So those are two things that I feel like are are um, are sort of things that I have going for me, because as my upbringing,
You're on here too?
as a
You're on here
man,
too?
I've been told that that I can't I can do certain things. That my movements have been less policed, if you will, throughout my life, and so I have a little bit of that ingrained in me. I just do it, just do it. And the other of being an extrovert, of course, in a world that I think highly prioritizes extroverted qualities, that's also another thing that I have that allows me to sort of have, kind of blend those ingredients and kind of go for it. But now getting into it, I feel like you don't need to be a man or an extrovert to be successful. And so the hope is that um, we kind of acknowledge the fact that there are enough like haters out there in the world that we don't have to be one for ourselves. So like we already have enough of that outside of ourselves. And so what I would say is don't be the don't be the one to self-filter. Don't filter yourself out. Let them tell you no. That's the like it the worst thing that's gonna happen is they're gonna tell you no, and if you weren't gonna apply anyways, well then what does it matter? So then just apply and let them tell you no. Best case scenario is they tell you no and you ask for feedback and they give it to you. And they give you why you didn't get it. And so now you had a learning opportunity. Um, I think also for the most part too, something that's been really helpful for me is my faith and sort of like letting go of the outcome and believing that what comes of it, like if it's God's will, it will. That's kind of how I think about it. And so if an opportunity didn't come my way or I was shut down or a door closed, then that wasn't the avenue or the sort of the road that I was meant to take. It's somewhere else. And actually that was just sort of letting you know you're close, but maybe not right here. So, take a slight right and then keep going. So that's kind of how I've thought about a lot of things is I try not to self-filter. I ask for what I want, and let them tell me no. And that is not something that I've always had to at this level, but over years and years, I think of practicing it, I've gotten better at it and more confident that like the no's aren't gonna kill me. Like I quit that job at Apple 4 years later after getting that. That I survived. Awesome. Okay, cool. I started a startup, an air freshener company that went sort of international, and then I was sued by Selena Quintanilla's father, my like one of my heroes' dads, like sued me, and look, I survived, and then I got laid off by Google, and then I survived, and so like an understanding that like, and God willing, that we'll survive the things that come at us, and so just having faith and moving forward. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that part, and I'm really curious about, because it's such a fear for all of us, right? Going through a layoff, getting fired, it's so much unknown. Can you tell us a little bit about the transition when you were let go from Google and how one door closed and one door opened into what you started?
Yeah. The other day I was trying to explain to my kids what laid off meant. It was hella funny. So my daughter would kind of understood it more. She's a little older, so but my son was saying that like, oh, so they fired you? Your boss fired you? And I said, well, it's kind of like firing, but they like give you money to leave. So it's kind of like that. And then my daughter chimed in. It's like, it's not that he didn't do a good job, because that's why you get fired, because you didn't do a good job. He was doing a good job. He just and so that's why I like that part. It's like that was a good reminder for me that like one of the biggest things I took from being laid off, and there was a beautiful I'm my fraternity brother, one of my fraternity brothers is Damian Trujillo from NBC Telemundo. And so whenever I've had something big happen in my life, I hit him up and I say, yo, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do something on my show. Let's go, you know? And so it's a beautiful thing to be able to reach out to him. And when he found out that I was laid off, he was like, I want to do a story about like, um, after, life after tech.
Yeah.
And so basically, the biggest takeaway from that was that my self-worth, my value as a human being is not tied to my productivity nor the place that I work at. I could work at Google or I could work at McDonald's. My value as a human being is still the same. And so the point here was that that I wanted to share in that news story was that some folks took it as like devastating news, and like it was like, what were we gonna do, and like entered into panic mode. While one, I had no idea what was happening at the time. I'd never been laid off before. And so I tried to sign in to my work email, and all of a sudden I just wasn't able to get in, and I was like, what's happening? I'm like, okay, maybe it's my Wi-Fi, whatever, something, right? And then I started getting texts and DMs from colleagues saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I heard the news. And I thought I had died. That's how I was like, wait, did I die?
Is
And
this real?
so when I realized that that wasn't the case, and I was like, wait, I'm not getting it. And I was like, let me Google something. And it's funny, I was able to get into Google at least. I said it was like Google, like I was like, maybe I'm getting layoffs. And it's like the first thing, it's like 11,000 Google employees laid off by Google's first round of layoffs. And I was like, whoa, I think I just got laid off. And I was like, I don't know what happens next, but I kind of I took a moment to kind of like take it all in, and then I started to write, and that became my outlet for a little bit. And I think you found my Medium post. I started that right after getting laid off, and I was like, I'm just gonna write, and I'm just gonna like let all this out. And then at that point, I kind of had I knew I needed to kind of to be what is it? I knew I needed to be cognizant of how other folks were receiving this news versus how I was receiving it. I received it as an opportunity, and luckily a blessing, because of course, being laid off, I was, you talked about transparency. I had an 8-month runway that I was paid. Like I had my salary and a bunch of other money that came together that basically was the equivalent of 8 months. And so I knew at the very least that I wasn't just going to be like, oh my gosh, I have 8 months to find another job. Like, it was like, oh my gosh, I have 8 months to like enjoy, to like take a step back. At that point in my life, I had gone through a phase that I called cleanse and curate. And so I just like cleansed everything that was not that was not adding joy to my life. It was like, I'm just getting drained. And I curated back in the things that I loved. And so this was another moment to kind of really curate the things that I was going to take on, because the big aha moment from that was, if anything, if you ever got to the point where anything was possible, what would you do? That was the question that I asked myself. And so anything is possible. I have 8 months runway. So I'm getting paid. Like, I'm not gonna like go into panic mode. And, worst comes to worst, after 8 months, if my other ventures don't work out, or if it's not looking fun, or if things are not panning out how I thought, then I could always just go and get another job. Like, it's okay, And so, but that was it. I knew I had this great opportunity in front of me. If anything was possible, what are you going to do? And so I went and did a bunch of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, you certainly did. That's really impressive. I just want to take a pause and open it up to the community to see if there's any questions. Incredible speaker, an incredible story. So much to learn from you.
Thank you. Yes,
Tim,
anything.
yeah.
Obviously, I talk about anything, and I share a lot. So no, don't be afraid.
Awesome. Let's start with Tim and then go to Vanessa.
Yeah, Ruben, great story. You mentioned so many things, so many words of wisdom there, but two things I want to go back to. Number one was, I think young kids coming out of high school or college, they're feeling a lot of pressure out. What are they going to do? Everybody wants to know, what are you going to do? What's your career?
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm working with a student now. He got accepted to Berkeley, and he starts in the fall, and he's already changed his major twice before he's even started. Because when you're young, you don't know all the possibilities.
Yeah.
And you go to college, and all of a sudden you take a course and you go, wow, that's opened my eyes. So I just really think it's important for young people to realize, be open to new ideas, and don't get worried about, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be, whatever my dad was. When I was young, I wanted to be a postal carrier because I thought, gosh, that's the only job I knew. I saw the postal carrier every day come and deliver stuff. So I wanted to be a postal carrier. That's all I knew. But as you go to college, you learn so much more if you're looking, if you got your eyes open. So I think that's important. Don't feel the pressure. Just say, I'm exploring, and you find your passions. Number one. Number two is, you mentioned about asking for help. And gosh, I'll bet you everybody on this group says when they graduated from college, they should have taken advantage of all the support and all the different things that are available to them. Network and build up a network and support before you need it. You don't want to call your friends once you're out of a job and say, hey, I'm out of a job. What do you got? It's kind of late. You got to develop that beforehand, network before you're desperate, before you need it. You're
Yes.
going to need networking. You ain't going to do it yourself. And your college has resources, your high school has resources that can be helpful. Seek them early. That's all.
Good advice, Coach. Thank you so much.
That was really great. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
Well,
that.
you made good points.
We'll go to Vanessa and then Myra.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ruben, for your stories. I agree with Tim, a lot of wisdom there, and your courage and your boldness and taking those risks are phenomenal. I've been working in my career over 20 years, and that's still a struggle for me. So hats off to you. That's great. And especially at Google and Apple. And I did work with Steve Jobs, and he was very big on thinking different, and he was very big on taking risks. So that too, probably, I'm sure, was a huge factor in getting you into Apple. He would have loved you. My question for you is, what were your roles? What were you doing at Apple and Google? It sounds like maybe you were on the design side, but if maybe you can talk a little bit about the departments that you worked in and what you were doing.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, probably a few months into my contract at Apple, I is when Steve Jobs, we got the news that he passed. So that's around the time where I was at Apple. But so one thing is for like future notice, like don't be afraid of contract roles. I love contract roles now. Because that's how I converted. I've done it twice. I've converted a contract role at Apple into full-time role, and I did the same thing at Google. And to quit Apple and then take a contract role at Google, some people are like would say, well, you're taking a step down, like don't do that. And it's like, no, that's the fastest and easiest way in. I'm gonna get in there, I'm gonna build a network, and by the time they realize that, that they need me, my contract's gonna be done, and they're gonna be like, oh, let's get this guy in and hire him on full time. So that's kind of been my approach, is that definitely don't be afraid. Actually look out for contract roles, because even if they're like 6 months, you have 6 months at a great company to experience this specific role to see if you really like it. And then say that is kind of coming to an end and you don't like it, well, then you just learned all the stuff that you did, you added something to your resume of experience, and now you go and find another contract role, right? And so eventually, if you love it enough, you try to convert yourself to full time. And I think that's one thing that I did twice that I really recommend to young professionals, is to look out for those contract roles. So I took a contract role, which was 6 months to a year. It said working so at that time, the reason why I was asked to design something 4 times the size was because at that time, Retina display iPhones and iPads and MacBooks were about to come out. And so they had this technology where it was really high def, but they were still working with the same old graphics that they had before in the regular iPhones and hardware. And so they thought, okay, let's just blow it up twice the size and it adds more pixels and it's going to look great. They were wrong. It looked really bad. And so they needed a team to basically redesign everything so that it would be in vector format or scalable for the future use. And so that was me and 9 other folks. We ended up naming ourselves the Truffle Shuffle team. And so but basically we were in a windowless room with like top secret hardware, and we were just going through like one by one. Like my team and we redesigned iPhoto, iMovie, GarageBand, iWork, so Keynote Pages, Numbers, some like most of the really big apps we redesigned, and we had to unfortunately for us at that time, the style was called skeuomorphism, which meant like Apple really loved how they liked making things look realistic in their apps, so you felt like you were actually playing the piano, like the little keys. And so that made it really difficult as an artist and designer, because you had to replicate that, but like add more detail, because now there's more pixels to be had. So we spent a year and a half going through like 16,000 assets and like redesigning everything to the point where, we future-proofed it. We designed everything at like 4x so that, we knew at some point if we're having to do it at 2, 4x was in the future. So we just did it. And we had a really great, I mean, to the day that there was no way that I was a Photoshop expert when I applied, and when I sat next to everybody else, I knew immediately I was not a Photoshop expert. But the beautiful thing was that we were working together in like this really isolated moment in time and isolated room, and that we were constantly just pulling techniques off of each other and getting special trainings on Photoshop. And when I left, I was definitely an expert, but just definitely not when I walked in. And so that's what I did. So very much like you have a task, you come in, you do it, you get through them as fast as you can. It was definitely like a job that I only could have done then, like 10, 12 years ago. Like I wouldn't want to put up with that now. I'm like, no, chill, hey, let's relax, let's do something creative. But at that time, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I thought this is how it was in tech. So I'm like, all right, no windows, small teams, let's go. And eventually I converted that to a full-time role, and I continued in design, in what was called production design, essentially. And that meant that I had to speak like the designers, and I had to speak like the engineers, and I had to be like the bridge between the two. So I had to know what the designers wanted, and I had to know the limitations that the engineers had. And so I had to bridge that gap. And so that was a fun thing, that when a manager left that team, he said, hey, he left and then hit me up later and said, hey, I'm going to Google to go do what you basically just finished doing at Google. If you want a job in the future, let me know. And I said, okay, cool. And I was at that time, I was still at Apple. So I'm like, like, sure. And, or maybe he was just being nice. I don't know. I didn't consider the fact that he was being genuinely like inviting me to have a job at Google. But when I quit Apple, and because I was burnt out, of course, that culture of working and grinding and like, mandatory Saturdays and doing some crazy stuff over at Apple for a while, I was like, I can't anymore. I quit. That's when I started Fuchila Fresheners, was my international air freshener company. And then so I hit him up. I took him up on his word. He said, hit me up. He said, hey, come on over. I want you to grab some lunch at Google. And I said, all right, cool. So I did. He was like, oh, I invited the team to have lunch with you. Awesome. And then after the team left, I was like, all right, let me know when I can come back for like an interview. I'm really excited for, the potential of working here. And he was like, what are you talking about? That was an interview. You're in. Like that was it. Like,
Wow.
like you're in, dude. Like you already did the job, and you're obviously the whole team like these, so you're in. Like, let me email you your contract or whatever. And so, I mean, like, if we want to talk about numbers too, I can. At Apple, it was wild to me that I was making $109,000 at my first job at that time. Right now, it probably sounds like, that's pretty good. Actually, it's still really good, but still, at that time, even more so, $109,000 a year, or technically speaking, it was hourly, so it was $85 an hour at that time. And then now coming into Google, I basically said, well, I was making 85. I told them I was making 90 over there. So I added some. I said, I'm making 90 at an hour at Apple. And he was like, okay, we can do 95. And I was like, all right, cool. So I got the 95 an hour. And then when I converted eventually, by the time I left Google after 8 years at Google, I was making $275,000 a year plus stocks, plus that just kept coming in. And so when people say like golden handcuffs, it's real, like I could have gotten really used to that lifestyle and like outdid myself when my wife and I bought a house. Like we bought the cheapest house that we could find that we enjoyed. We weren't like trying to overextend ourselves. Like, so anyways, that was a lot more than I think you were asking for, but I think I had to kind of touch on all those points. So
Ruben, thank you for being really transparent about pay and how that scaled, because we don't have enough of those conversations. It's important to share. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple questions before we close up with our rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah.
Keep you honest. Myra, do you mind introducing yourself? Where you're calling from?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mayra Valtierra. I'm a graphic designer. I'm a graphic design instructor here at Digital Nest.
I'm a fan first.
Yeah, but I have two questions. It's more on like the business side of things. As you know, like I also am a freelance graphic designer and I do art and illustration. And so I'm curious, like for you, like my first question is, how does your business align with your values?
I love that. How do my business align with my values? Well, I created I didn't think of my starting point was my values. And so that's kind of why it was easy. It wasn't like I thought of a way to make money and then I try to configure that to my values. I just said, like, what do I love to do? And at that time, when I was starting Food Chula Fresheners, it was like, I just want to see myself in cool products. I just want to see my culture represented, and in something even as small as an air freshener. And my wife and I love car shows, so we would go to car shows a lot. We'd see a lot of the little trees, but air fresheners, but they were always hidden like under, and because they weren't cool. And I'm like, you have $130,000 car right here, but you're like hiding your air freshener because it's not cool. I'm like, I want to be the kind of freshener that you want to hang on your on your rear view. So that was my mentality. And I immediately created what I call my 3 C's. And so going to Santa Clara University is a Jesuit institution. Santa Clara University's 3 C's are competence, conscience, and compassion. And so those are like the education of the full human being. We're, multidimensional, and our job is to be of service to others, right? That's kind of the hallmark of a Jesuit education. And for me, I said, I like their 3 C's, but I need to create my own 3 C's. And so my 3 C's are craft, cultura, and comunidad. And so craft is like your pursuit of whatever you do, it is that is your labor of love, your expertise, like pursue it and get better at it and continue to work at it. And cultura is anything, whether it's cultura like ethnicity or like your ethnic background, where you came from, your roots, but also the culture that you surround yourself with, of the people that you surround yourself with, the kind of like work environments that you like to create with you and your colleagues. And then the last is comunidad, which of course, like a general understanding and promotion that we need each other. This is like, we're not going to get through this thing called life without everyone here, like on this little Brady Bunch. Like we're going to, at some point, we may reach out to each other for different things. And so that aspect of comunidad. So what I would say is knowing your 3 C's is what's going to come in handy to how you align what you do with your with your values. So whether that's taking my 3 C's and reconfiguring them and be like, oh, I really like those, I'm gonna adopt them and work on them in this other way, or whatever it is that your values are, is you have to define those first before you can figure out how your business is gonna align to that. But I think naturally we know what those are, because it's like when you feel any sense of what do you call it? Procrastination, or like, that's kind of a sign that it's not in that direction. So I kind of use procrastination as an indicator of where I should be going. And so kind of avoid going versus some people are like, push through that procrastination, like get it done, go through it. And it's like, well, wait, think about, why are you procrastinating? Like, what's that underlying thing that's happening that, so I would say define your values first and know those really well, because everything that I do has to do with one of those 3 C's, or else I don't get involved in it. And then consider, like, if you were to own your own business, which you do, what's the kind of culture you would want, like, your younger self to have worked at? Like, that's the kind of work environment I like to create for my colleagues and the folks that I oversee. It's like, I would have loved to have worked at the place that I'm creating, 10 years ago. But now I'm in a place where I'm creating that environment. So that's what I would say.
That's awesome. And I just want to say that I have a really big admiration for what you're doing, especially in the Gilbert community. I think it's so cool. It's something that I hope to kind of do in Watsonville. And then so my second question was, as a business owner, how do you prioritize like your goals as a business?
Damn, that one's hard. I feel like that's a whole other kind of like conversation. How do you prioritize? I think it's the same way. I think a lot of it for me, it's like, I mean, I'm always building the plane as I fly it. So kind of sometimes you got to address things that are burning, like, oh no, this is burning, I got to fix this. And other times you kind of have to be like, okay, again, if anything was possible, what would you do? And then you start to kind of prioritize based on the things that are giving you energy. I would say check in with yourself. Whatever feels like is giving you energy, prioritize that. Like, why not? Like, if you have the choice to choose whatever it is you work on, especially as an independent artist and designer, choose the clients that give you that kind of treat you well, that give you energy. The projects that inspire you, that immediately you know how you want it to look like in your head, because I know that comes to you in that way. So you go follow those, basically, is what I would say in the most simple terms that I can, so that we can leave question for
For
Jaciel.
Jaciel, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thanks. We
thank
have
you.
time for one more question. Hacia, thanks
Yeah.
for being patient.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys. So I think my question was, how much time would you say you spend on trying to learn new things and expanding yourself, and how much of that are you applying, do you think, in your everyday? I know it's hard when you're a business owner because it feels like everything may apply, but
Mhm.
how much time would you say is recommendable to be like, okay, you have to be trying to like learn this new thing? Or like when you talked about the Photoshop thing, you were like, I'll apply and I'll learn on the background, like I don't care, you know? So I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting.
I think there was a mentor at Google. He's probably the only high level Latino, one of the only high level Latinos that I knew. He said to me, like, sometimes at a place like Google, you're either getting paid to learn, or you're getting paid to be really good at what you already know. So I feel like it comes in eras and in phases. And for me, and when I was definitely like 10 years ago, I would have said like I was in an era of like just learning, trying to soak up as much as I could and learn. And I feel like right now I'm in an era of just being really good at what I do, and understanding that, again, my community is what's going to fill in the gaps. So finding folks that are really good at the things that I don't know anything about, finding folks that are actually excited about Excel sheets and other things like that, and are like, oh, awesome, great. Here, actually, let me make you in charge now of permitting for the city. Like, go, if, let's connect, let me know what you need from me. I'll do whatever it is that you need from me, but you handle this, and kind of take it, right? So kind of learning what phase you're in right now is probably helpful. So if you're in a learning phase right now, like expanding because you're still trying to figure out what you really want to kind of dive into, I think like the first phases of our lives are definitely like, horizontal, and later on, you go deep. So I would say it all depends on what phase of your career you're in. If you feel like you already found what you're really passionate about, then just get really, really good at that, and you don't have to worry about getting better at the things you suck at. I would say I would rather focus on the things you're really good at.
I love that. That's great advice. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. Ruben, you've been pretty open about people connecting with you on LinkedIn. Would it be okay for follow-up questions to come to you directly?
Of course, yeah. Hit me up on LinkedIn or even Instagram. I'm there at Mr.Fuchila, and then on LinkedIn it's Ruben Dario Villa. Yeah.
Awesome. 3 quick questions for you before we sign off.
Yes.
One, what's the most fun, or a caveat is a quick rapid response, first thing
Yes.
that comes to your mind, okay?
Okay.
What's been the most fun or interesting project you've ever worked on?
La Ofrenda Festival.
Ah,
For
good.
sure.
What TV family would you most like to be a part of for one day?
The Addams Family. I think I love their style. I love the vibes. Yeah, I love that for sure.
What's the most underrated appetizer at the restaurant?
Ooh, I thought about this one actually. I said either like spicy edamame or like a good like fried shishito peppers. I feel like those are often overlooked, but like a really good
But they
like
shouldn't be. They shouldn't
yeah.
be.
Ah, so good. Ah, so good.
The shishito peppers have an unfair advantage.
I
They
don't know.
come out.
For
Gotta
sure.
come out. What an honor to spend some time with you, everyone, for joining the call. Thank you so much for building our community, coming together and sharing a vulnerable space, really, between all of us. So we really appreciate you. If you're not already signed up for the Cura newsletter, please sign up. Cura.us. Pretty simple. We'll keep you posted with future events. And thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ruben.
Take care.